Welcome to Literacy Matters Empowered Conversations. I'm your host, Dr. Cheryl Lundy Swift. I am super excited if you are really interested in learning about the science of reading and really how to put that in action. Well, our next guest has all of the strategies for you. Our next guest, Malia Hollowell, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here.
Thanks, Malia. So, Malia is a national board certified teacher and the author of The Science of Reading in Action. Malia has many years of classroom experience and she has a deep commitment to advancing literacy. She now focuses on empowering school leaders with science backed, evidence based strategies to drive student success. Her mission is to ensure that every student, regardless of background, reaches their fullest potential through transformative reading practices that are grounded in research. So let's get into it, Malia.
Let's do it.
So, I've had the privilege of attending a few conferences recently. I was at Plain Talk recently and the Reading League last year. And, I have a lot of teachers that come up to us and they're really kind of in that space where they know a little bit about the science of reading, but they don't really know how to apply, right? So that they can have the impact that they need to have with students. How do you think we can better support teachers who have some knowledge but are really struggling to implement science-based reading instruction?
This question is so important because it's one of the biggest challenges that I've seen in working with teachers as well. There are so many teachers who have completed sometimes years of training. I know the letters training can take 2 years to complete. And they come to me and say, I have so much knowledge, and yet I have no idea how to actually implement it in my classroom. And that's a problem. It's similar to taking driver's ed. You and I were talking about this before we went live. My 15-year-old is getting ready to take driver's ed, and I think if he went through all of the classes and he had all of this knowledge about how to follow the traffic signs and what to do in terms of the laws and rules, but we never actually gave him a car to drive, he's not a driver. So it's very similar in this case too. If we give teachers a lot of knowledge, that's great, but it's only the first step. We also need to make sure that we are empowering them with the tools they need to actually implement it and implement it well.
It's so very true. And I love that analogy and much success to you with that teen driver.
Please pray for me.
Been there. So I also know that there's like another group of teachers who have the knowledge, who are implementing it, really well and are having success in their classrooms. So how do we continue to effectively support those teachers again who are implementing it with some real efficacy and seeing students succeed?
So many teachers that fit into that next bucket have come to me and said, I'm just frustrated. I am so frustrated because I don't have a peer group to lean on. I don't have a group of teachers who are the same expertise level as me, who I can collaborate with and problem solve with. And so many of those teachers have found that they are, because they're more advanced, they're ready to really roll up their sleeves and become experts on differentiation so that they can meet every child's needs no matter where they're at. And they don't find very often that they actually have a peer group that is at that same place. So I think the most important thing that we can do as leaders is to ensure that they are empowered with more advanced training on supporting multilingual learners, making sure that we are providing appropriate supports for students with dyslexia or students with dysgraphia. The list goes on. And also making sure that we give them the opportunity to collaborate and connect with other educators who are in that more advanced space.
I love that. You really need to find your people, right? You really need to find some people that you can learn from and grow with. And I think it's so important for leaders to make sure that they provide that space to be able to do that. I used to get that feedback all the time as a principal that, hey, we can't all be sitting in the same room learning the same thing because we're not on the same place. So that's really, again, differentiating even for our adults is also important, right? So, when it comes to reading instruction, right, I know that there are some barriers that you mentioned in your book. What you think are the three most common barriers when you think about creating a real successful reading instructional environment? What gets in our way?
Well, I found that there are three keys to success, and it's really important that you have all three pieces of the puzzle. It's like losing a puzzle piece. If you don't have one of those, then the picture is not complete. So the three pieces of the puzzle are really ensuring that teachers are empowered with research-based best practice. So they have evidence-based training on how brains actually learn to read. The
Mm,
second piece is ensuring that they have teaching tools that make implementing it really easy. We know teachers' schedules are already jam-packed, and if we're expecting them to embrace these new strategies and this new way of teaching, we need to make sure that we're laying out a very clear roadmap that they can follow to do that well and do it easily. We want to set them up for success on day one. And then the third piece of the puzzle is making sure that they have ongoing support. We know that no matter how well we prepare teachers, we can give them all the knowledge, all the tools they need, and yet there are still going to be hurdles along the way.
mhm.
No student is like any other student they're going to come across. So we want to make sure that they have those collaborative partners that they can reach out to brainstorm and collaborate and problem solve when
Yeah.
those hurdles do pop up.
Well, you know what? I think what's really great is, our podcast. I recently heard someone say, we use your podcast for our professional learning community. It's 20 minutes. It's easy. So it's really great to really think about using some of those resources in that manner. And in fact, I know they're going to really love this podcast because you're about to give us, I think, some brain-friendly strategies that every teacher should really know. And this is just some of the strategies that I know that are in your book. So what are some brain-friendly strategies that teachers can use?
Well, I have taken on the challenge of whittling these down to just three. I know we only have 20 minutes, but
Yes,
I tried to pick just the top three. If I could wave a magic wand and be a fairy godmother and just hope that all of these things would happen in every classroom across the country, these are the three beginning steps that I would hope that every teacher would feel comfortable taking.
sure.
So number one is practicing phonics and phonemic awareness every single day. And when I say that, we know the research is very clear that most students cannot connect the dots in their brain that they need in order to be able to read. And if you think about the history of reading and writing, that makes sense. It's very new to humanity. We've been talking with cave language grunts and and pointing and all of the cavemen things that we used to do for millions of years. And we've only been writing and reading for between 5 and 7,000 years, depending on which historian you hear. And so that means that our brain just has not had enough time to evolve and create the neural pathways that it needs to be able to naturally and easily learn this new written language. So as teachers, our job is to make sure that we are laying it all out. We are helping students connect the dots. And the only way that we can do that is if we're practicing those skills every single day. So we need to make sure that students are learning to hear sounds in words. If you have a word like dog, we want them to be able to break apart those three individual sounds. We
Sure.
want them to be able to move those sounds around. All of that is phonemic awareness. The second piece then is taking those sounds that we've helped students learn to hear and connecting those sounds to the written letters or combination of letters that are used to spell them. And that's the phonics piece. So we need to practice phonemic awareness and phonics every day. That's number one.
Mm,
Wish number two is that we use that list of phonics and spelling rules that we're teaching, and we connect it to the sight words that we're having students learn. So many classrooms that I've been in have random lists of words up on the wall, and these words are organized with a very good intention. The idea is that they're high frequency words. These are words students are going to see over and over and over again, words like the and of. And we want students to learn them as quickly as possible because we know they're going to have to read them a lot. So we don't want them to be agonizing over how to sound them out. But the problem is that they're not organized in any order beyond just how frequently they will be read. And that means that for brand new readers in particular, they're often being asked to memorize words that have very different phonics and spelling patterns in the same week. They
mm,
might be learning the words and, to, and for. And has a short A, to has a funky O that's making some funny sound, and for has a long O. So we have all these different rules, right? That's just the vowels
right,
that
right.
students are having to wrap their brain around. So we want to make this process as easy as possible for students, and we can do that by simply taking our sight word lists We can teach the same words in a year, but we're going to teach them in a different order. We're going to take all of our short A words like and, am, can. We're going to teach them when we teach the short A lesson. Then we're going to take all of our short E words and we're going to teach them when we teach the short E lesson. You can see how this very simple sorting exercise makes it exponentially easier for students to learn. So that is wish number 2.
That is clever. That is really clever. Yeah.
Really clever. And so it sounds so easy. And when you hear it, you think, oh my gosh, of course we would teach it that way.
Sure.
But we've been trained and we've been told that that's not the way you do it.
Right, right.
Yeah, so to no fault of anyone's. The last wish that I would have is that we replace our sight word flashcards. I started teaching back in 2003, and I was taught to, is it drill and kill? Whatever that
Yep.
term is.
Drill and kill.
Yes, drill and kill. We would take sight word flashcards and we would have our students just go over them over and over and over again. And by the end of a week, they've probably seen them 5,000 times. And half of them would still really struggle with those words. And the
Sure.
reason is because we were relying on visual memory. And we now know, the research is clear, that's not how we learn to read. We actually learn to read through sound. So what we need to do instead is put those flashcards away. And we want to have students actually focus in on the sounds in a word first. So in that dog example, we want them to break those sounds apart. D, ah, g. Now let's connect those sounds to the letters. D, they're going to write the D. Ah, they're going to write the O. G, they're going to write the G. And now we have given them the steps they need for their brain to remember that when they see D, O, G, it makes the sounds D, ah, g, and they can blend it together to make the word dog. So we're going to replace those flashcards it's called sound mapping, but it basically just means we're going to have students focus on the sounds and then connect them to the letters.
I'm curious with that. Would you have them actually write it? What if they can't write just yet? Maybe they're having trouble forming the letter. Would you use like letter tiles?
100%. You could use letter tiles, or you could actually just do this through verbal spoken language. That's actually what we have our pre-K and kindergarten teachers at the beginning of the year. We have them just practice all of these activities through spoken language, because spoken language really is our base, it's our foundation. And so we can use that to our advantage. And then when they're ready, they can start writing the letters.
Wow, I love, I really do wish you had a magic wand for sure. And you know what we'd want to use that magic wand for is to give teachers more time, right? That's one of the things that we cannot manufacture, right? We can't manufacture more time. And I know a lot of teachers feel a lot of pressure. They have lots of kids in front of them with lots of different skills and abilities, and they're trying to maximize their literacy block. What can we do, thinking about those strategies that you have in mind, what can we do to really get the most out of our literacy block?
I always recommend a 4-step system I like to call ACED, ACED. So think of, I aced it.
Okay, got it.
And so each of those letters is going to stand for something. So step number 1 is A, and A is for assessment. When we think about heading out on a road trip, the very first step that we always take is pulling out our phone and typing in our starting location. Because if we don't type in our starting location, MapQuest has no idea where to send us. They don't know what the next step should be. And it's the same with teaching reading. If we do not pinpoint where students are starting their learning with us, then there's no way that we can possibly know what their best next step is, what we need them to teach them next. So we always start with assessment, A for assessment. Once we have that assessment data, then the doors of possibilities open for us, because we can move on to the next step, which is C for create. We want to create groups, because as you said, our classrooms are so diverse. We have so many different needs, and we want to make sure that we are giving every child targeted lessons. We might have a group of students who needs to practice those letter sounds. They're working on very basic phonics skills. They're learning to connect individual letters to the sounds they make. Well, we also might have students who are further along in the process, and they're learning about digraphs. Di is 2, graphs is letters, so those SH, CH, TH combinations. We want to make sure both groups of students are getting their just right lessons. The only way we can do that, given that we don't have a lot of time, is to divide them into groups. And we just use our assessment data to do that. It's like taking a bag of Skittles and sorting by color. We're going to take our assessment data and we're going to sort by skill. All of our letter sound kids are going to go in one group. All of our digraph kids will go in another. So that's step 2, creating groups. Step 3 is every group gets a just right end of year goal. And again, you want to make sure that you're taking into account where students are starting their year with you. Those kiddos who are learning those individual letter sounds may not be able to get to the same final destination at the end of the school year with you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because you want to make sure every child is reaching their fullest potential, whatever that is. And then the last step is we want to design a year-long plan. And that's when we do something called backwards designing. And I like to think of this like time traveling. So if you were to blast into the future, go to the end of the year, you would set the goals that you have for students and you would work backwards to figure out what you need to teach every month to get to where you're starting. So you're working backwards, but by working backwards, you're actually ensuring that you get to that final destination, that end of year goal that you've set. So A is for assess, C is for create groups, E is for every group gets a just right goal, and D is for design a year-long plan.
I think you just aced it yourself. That's great.
Thank you.
I love it. That's a really great way to remember those 4 important steps to really maximize your literacy block. I mean, that's such a smart way to think about that. So when I think about students who are struggling to read, I think about a particular second grade student who was having difficulty, right? And you can imagine that a second grader who is having difficulty reading in the second grade likely has not had a lot of success in kindergarten, not a whole lot of success in first grade, and they are over it. You say it's the literacy block time, they do not want to go, they do not want to do it, they're not interested. How can a teacher really engage a student like that who doesn't believe in themselves, who has been disengaged, who may think that they can never learn to read? What can we do to support those kinds of students?
For so many of our students, we have given them expectations that are beyond their ability level. And so it's no wonder that they feel like they're failing because they feel overwhelmed. They feel stressed. It is a source of anxiety for their school day. And so one of the simplest things that we can start with is by ensuring that we are using these brain-friendly science of reading-based strategies. And a good example of that is what we were talking about just a couple minutes ago. When we are working with a word like dog, if we have a student who has not learned to actually write those letters yet, let's start with something simpler. Let's have them just break those sounds apart for us using their voice. We know that they can most likely do that.
Yeah.
Once they will realize that they are successful, then they will be more motivated. Another tip I have is to always ensure that we are using fun, playful activities. When we're breaking those sounds apart, we can grab a little tub of Play-Doh and have them roll balls of Play-Doh and squish the Play-Doh balls as they're breaking apart those sounds. It's a
Mhm.
simple addition to this activity, but it does make it fun. And the last thing I would say is anytime you have the chance to call your students readers and call out their success and point out that they're making progress, it's an opportunity to build their motivation because I don't know about you, but I don't really love doing things that I'm failing at. I would hate to
Right.
be thrown into a marathon tomorrow if I'm not ready for it. That sounds like torture. And
Right.
it's same for our kids too. If we're expecting them to do these things that they really feel unprepared to do successfully, they're just not going to be motivated. So we want them to see themselves as readers and know in their gut they can succeed.
I love that so much. We called our students scholars because we wanted them to feel and act like scholars. We wanted to believe that they were scholars. So I think again, calling them readers is fantastic. And success breeds success, right? And of course, we've got to put the joy back in learning, specifically in reading for those students who are having difficulty. I love the Play-Doh idea. That's a very simple way to make something even more fun. Love it, love it, love it. So, we've talked a little bit about differentiation. But when I think about, teachers trying to really give their entire class everything they need, right? And then also think about those students who may need a little bit more support. How can teachers balance those needs?
Well, that is the million-dollar question. So the biggest takeaway I hope teachers have from this conversation is that any chance we have to provide targeted instruction for students is a chance worth taking. And that means that if you are able to break your students into those small groups that we talked about that have very similar needs, it's a group of students with similar needs. If you're able to do that, it will lighten your load. So we want to make sure that we are pinpointing where those students are starting, and then we are giving them the specific targeted instruction that they need in order to be successful. And it's kind of like climbing a staircase. We have some students who are at the bottom of the staircase, and their just right next step is going to be much lower than students who are 2 flights up the staircase. But that doesn't mean that they cannot succeed. They just may be working at a different pace. So what the most important thing that teachers can do is pinpoint the students' needs, sort them into small groups so that they can give that highly targeted instruction to each of those groups, and then go from there. Continue to check in, ensure that they're getting that targeted practice, and monitoring their progress as they go along.
Wow, really a very simple way to kind of do that. It makes it feel doable, right? One of the tools that I know teachers are trying to get their hands on are decodable texts. I've also had some teachers ask me about leveled readers and have saying, "Oh, we have all these level readers. What can we do with them?" Can you tell us what decodable texts are, what level readers are, and which one of those we should be using?
Yes, let's go right to the heart of it. Start with decodable texts, always. So if you haven't heard that term before, decodable, I like to think of it like detective. So if you were a detective breaking a code, you would be able to use the clues and figure out the mystery. So if we are giving students decodable text, we are giving them a piece of writing. It could be a book, it could be a reading passage, and they are able to be detectives, use their knowledge that they've already gathered from you, and break the code of writing so that they can actually sound out these words. The difference between decodable text and leveled readers is that decodable text uses words that have phonics and spelling patterns students have already been taught. That's really important because it means that we're setting them up for success. In that example of the second grade student who was overwhelmed that you gave just a couple minutes ago, they're overwhelmed because, again, they're being asked to do things that they have not been empowered to actually do successfully. So it's no wonder they feel stressed. We want to ensure that every child is able to avoid that as much as possible. So we don't want them to have to read a book filled with CH words like chin and check and chap if we've never taught them that CH makes the ch sound.
Right.
Now, leveled readers are kind of old school books, right? I know a lot of our teachers continue to use them, but the reason I call them old school is because they're based on this now debunked myth that children should be able to read books with a certain number of words on each page. They should be able to look at a picture, an illustration on a page, and be able to guess what the words down below say based on that picture. All of these skills are great for playing a game and guessing a mystery, but it's not good for actually reading. That's not actually sounding out words and learning how to sound out unfamiliar words. So we want to make sure that we are always giving students decodable text. We are setting them up for success. The second piece of your question was, what do you do with those leveled books? And it would be tempting to say, just throw them in the dumpster, burn them. But of course, we're not going to do that. Books are valuable. So I would recommend going through the books and seeing if there are any that you could use as decodable text. You might have a group of students who has learned all of the skills in some of these books, and that means that they are decodable for that group. That's great. Use them. Keep it. Otherwise, you can take those books that don't fit and you can pass them along to older grades. So third, fourth, fifth grade teachers would love to get their hands on some other books and add to their classroom library.
That's great. I love that you even gave us what we can do with these leveled readers. And we at Learning Without Tears believe that kids should get right into those decodable texts. Once you have taught that skill, you want to make sure that they're actually reading real books, because we know that sometimes the kids can do that exercise with you verbally, right? And then they pick up the book and you don't realize why they can't read it. So it's important for us to make sure that kids get those decodable texts right away, right? And important that, again, they're only getting those decodable texts because they've been taught the skill. Like that's it. That's the key. I'm so glad you said that first. So, when I think about, we've been talking a lot about teachers and what they can do and how to save their time, but we know that teachers don't do this work alone. They have coaches that are working really, really hard. They have administrators, principals, and assistant principals that are working really hard to support them as well. What do you suggest those individuals do, the coaches, the administrators? What do they do to support teachers to make sure they're getting the gains that they can get and should get in their classrooms?
First of all, stay up on research. It's really important to be current on best practice. There are so many teachers who have come to me, again, with that frustration, that level of frustration. Now that they know better, they want to do better, and yet they're coming up against a lot of pushback from their administrative team simply because those administrators are not current on research. They don't know that there is a better, easier way for students to learn how to read. So your number one job is to ensure that you are being the leader in your building or in your school district. You are staying current with research. The other thing is, I would encourage you to continue to look at data on a regular basis and look for those outlier classrooms. Look and see if there's a classroom in your building or in your district that's getting leaps and bounds of faster, bigger progress, because I'd be willing to bet that there's a reason for that. And if you went to that teacher and asked what they're doing that's different from their peer group, you are likely to find that they're actually using these science of reading research-based best practices. And that's great information for you. That's very valuable because number one, it tells you that this does work. So it confirms it for you in case you have any doubt. And it also gives you an opportunity to then use this example to encourage your other teachers to get on board too. It becomes an exciting celebration because you're able to say, look at the leaps and bounds of progress that this classroom is getting. And the only change they've made is by switching to science of reading based practices.
Wow, you're basically underlining and underscoring what Leslie Zori and I talked about a while ago. We have this literacy action plan that makes sure that those administrators are also being developed, that you understand the science of reading. It is not just the job of the teacher. You also need to know the research so that you can better support your teachers. You need to be all on the same page. So, with that said, what can families do? What can families do to support their students at home?
Well, I know that right now, if you are on Instagram or Facebook, you've seen a lot of there are some beliefs that families really need to go all in and learn all of this themselves. And as you said with teachers, families are very busy, and I would never expect a family to go out and learn about the science of reading. That's not really their job, right? Their job is to be a parent, show up for their child. So I would actually encourage you to be an advocate. Certainly you can lean into this work, and I would encourage you, if you're interested in it or if you feel that your child would benefit from it, definitely lean in and learn it. But I also think that there is a place for you to just be a strong, fierce advocate for your child's needs. And when you recognize that your school is not using science of reading based practices, go in and talk to the principal, ask questions, encourage them to dive into the research and learn more, because you have a very important voice in all of this. Schools are really are in place to help your student reach their fullest potential. And hopefully working in partnership together, you will be able to ensure that that happens.
Yeah, that's such great advice. A lot of families are listening to Sold a Story by Emily Hamford and really getting empowered. And so I love that, there's more than one thing you can do. You don't have to go out and become well trained to be able to do this and train other teachers and so forth, but really know what it is and find out what's happening in your child's classroom, in your child's school. I love that idea. So, this has been a fantastic conversation. I know our listeners are leaving with lots and lots of strategies that they can implement right away. So, I'm going to ask you this one question. If there was one thing, and I know there are lots of things you'd like to share, but one thing to empower our listeners, what would it be?
Take the first step, whatever that first step is for you, because I know if you are listening to this, you likely are invested in helping your children reach their fullest potential. And so if you are further along in the process of diving into and using these research-based best practices, take it one step further. See if there's one more way that you can help differentiate and ensure that your students are getting their targeted just right practice. If you're brand new to all of this and you're learning these words like decodable text and it all feels like vocabulary stew, take just one step. This is not about overhauling everything. This really is just about continuing to learn and grow, just like we ask our students to. We want to be lifelong learners, and the more we know, the better we can be as teachers.
That's awesome advice. Thank you so much, Malia. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me.